Phoenix just entered a heat zone that scientists say no city should be able to survive. And the numbers coming out of Arizona right now are unlike anything recorded anywhere on Earth. Let me give you a single statistic that puts everything else in this video in context. In the summer of 2023, Phoenix recorded an overnight low of 97 degrees Fahrenheit. An overnight low, 97 degrees Fahrenheit. That is a new world record for the highest minimum temperature ever documented anywhere on Earth. The city did not cool down that night. It simply became slightly less hot than it was at noon. Drop a comment right now and tell me if you live in Phoenix or if you have family there, because by the end of this video you are going to understand exactly what scientists are saying about what it is, because what is building in the desert Southwest right now is something that should concern every American, not just the ones who live there. Here is what is actually happening in Phoenix right now, and why scientists are using language they have never used before to describe it. Maricopa County, the county that contains Phoenix and most of the metro area, recorded 645 heat-related deaths in 2023, then 608 in 2024, then 427 in 2025, a number that sounds like progress until you understand what it represents. 427 people killed by the temperature of the air, in a single county, in a single year. Since 2013, more than 4,320 people have died from heat exposure in Arizona. That is not a statistic from a developing country without air conditioning infrastructure. That is from one of the wealthiest states in the United States, in a city that has spent nearly $185 million over 5 years specifically trying to keep people alive in the heat. And the first heat death of 2026 arrived in April, not July, not August, April, when the average high in Phoenix should be in the low 80s. The heat season is no longer a season. It is most of the year. To understand why Phoenix is in a category by itself, you have to understand what is happening to the city's nights. And this is the part that most coverage gets wrong. Most people think of heat as a daytime problem. You go outside, it is hot, you come inside, you cool down. The human body can tolerate extraordinary daytime temperatures if it gets a recovery window at night. Core temperature drops, heart rate settles, the cardiovascular system resets. You wake up the next morning ready to face another day. Phoenix is taking that recovery window away. When the overnight low is 97 degrees, there is no recovery window. A body that spent all day fighting 110-degree heat goes to sleep in 97-degree air and wakes up already elevated, already stressed, already closer to the threshold where things start to fail. Day after day, week after week through a summer that now starts in April and runs past October. The 2025 heat season ranked as the 4th hottest in Phoenix history, behind only 2024, 2023, and 2020. Those are the 4 hottest years in recorded history for this city, and they are the 4 most recent years. This is not a random statistical fluctuation. This is a direction. Now here is something that should stop you cold, and I want every person watching this to understand this because it changes everything about how we think about Phoenix's heat. Scientists have long used a metric called the wet bulb temperature to identify the world's deadliest heat conditions. The wet bulb temperature measures how well the air allows your sweat to evaporate, which is the primary way your body cools itself. The assumption for decades was that dry heat, like Phoenix's heat, was less dangerous than humid heat, because dry air evaporates sweat efficiently. You can handle 110 degrees in dry air better than 95 degrees in thick Gulf humidity. That was the prevailing scientific consensus. A study published just weeks ago in Nature Communications, co-authored by researchers at Arizona State University, says that assumption is wrong. The researchers examined 6 heat waves across the globe, including Phoenix's record-breaking summer of 2023. Their finding, extremely hot and dry conditions are just as deadly as hot and humid conditions, but for very different reasons. In dry heat, the problem is not that your sweat stops evaporating. It is that your body tries to cool itself so aggressively that it dehydrates faster than you can drink. The evaporation works. It works so fast that it strips moisture from your body at a rate that overwhelms your ability to replace it. Your cooling system does not fail. It runs at full speed until you run out of fuel. Jennifer Vanos, the ASU professor who co-authored the research, said it directly. The formula scientists have been using to identify deadly heat waves around the world have been dangerously overlooking dry climates like Phoenix. The city has been producing death tolls that the existing models said were not possible at those wet bulb temperatures. The models were wrong. The deaths were real. This matters enormously for what comes next. Because if dry heat is as deadly as humid heat, just through a different mechanism, then Phoenix is not a city that has learned to manage an extreme climate. It is a city that has been underestimating the danger of its climate for decades, counting deaths that a flawed metric said should not be happening, and now confronting a heat trajectory that is moving in only one direction. The 2025 summer saw temperatures at Phoenix Sky Harbor Airport hit at least 110 degrees on 37 separate days. National Weather Service extreme heat warnings were in effect for 31 of those days. Daily highs exceeded 115 degrees 5 times. The overnight low failed to drop below 90 degrees on 23 separate nights. These are not numbers from the hottest summer in Phoenix history. They are from the fourth hottest. The three hotter summers were 2024, 2023, and 2020. And this summer has already started the same way. Phoenix's first heat death in 2026 arrived in April, during a record March heat wave that pushed temperatures past 100 degrees weeks before the typical heat season begins and forced the closure of popular hiking trails. A formal extreme heat warning for the entire Phoenix metro was issued in May with forecasted highs topping 108 degrees. The Heat Season Surveillance Dashboard, a public tracking tool that updates weekly with confirmed deaths and hospital admissions, is already running. Now here is the detail buried in the city's own 2026 heat response plan that nobody is talking about. This is the final year of ARPA-supported funding for Phoenix's expanded heat relief programs. The cooling centers that stayed open around the clock. The hydration stations, expanded shelter beds, 1,880 of them added since 2022. The heat relief network that the county's own data says saved hundreds of lives during the years when Maricopa County's death toll was at its highest. All of that was funded in part through federal emergency pandemic relief money that runs out this year. The county's chief medical officer has confirmed the concern publicly. The programs worked. The death toll dropped from 645 to 427 in 2 years. And now the money that paid for the programs that produced that improvement is gone, in the middle of what forecasters are already warning could be another catastrophic summer. Phoenix has a chief heat officer. It has a dedicated office of heat response and mitigation. It has a heat relief network that launches every May 1st. These are not small things. The city is more prepared for extreme heat than almost any other city on Earth, because it has had more practice surviving it than almost any other city on Earth. And it is still killing 400 people a year. Here is what scientists are actually watching for Phoenix in the summer ahead. And this is the part that I want you to pay attention to specifically. The compound growth rate of heat deaths in the United States between 2016 and 2023 was 16.8% per year. That is the number published in the Journal of the American Medical Association. If that trajectory continues, annual U.S. heat deaths will exceed 5,000 by 2030. Not across Phoenix alone, nationwide, but Phoenix is where that number concentrates most severely, because Phoenix is where the heat is hottest, longest, and most inescapable for the people who cannot afford to leave. The overnight low of 97 degrees that Phoenix recorded in 2023 was a world record. The heat wave that produced it was, according to researchers, essentially impossible in a pre-industrial climate. The 4,320 deaths since 2013 are people who died because the air where they lived became too hot for their bodies to survive. And the trajectory, 4 of the 5 hottest summers in Phoenix history occurring in the last 5 years, is not a pattern that has any momentum toward cooling. Phoenix is not becoming uninhabitable next week, but it is becoming something that the city was never designed for, at a pace that is outrunning the infrastructure built to manage it, in a summer that started early and is running hot, with the funding that saved the most lives about to run out at exactly the moment the city needs it most. Drop a comment and tell me if you have been to Phoenix, if you live there, or if you think this is the future for other cities too, because it is not just Phoenix. Houston, Las Vegas, Dallas. The same trajectory is building in every major city in the American Southwest, and Phoenix is just the one that is furthest down the road. But before we get there, I want to talk about something that the death toll numbers do not capture, and it is the thing that keeps emergency managers in Phoenix awake at night more than any single temperature record: the power grid. Phoenix's heat does not just kill people directly. It kills people by killing the system that keeps them alive. When temperatures stay above 110 degrees for days at a time, every air conditioning unit in a metro area of 5 million people runs at full capacity simultaneously. The demand on the electrical grid during a Phoenix heat wave is not seasonal peak demand. It is maximum theoretical demand, sustained for weeks with almost no overnight relief because the overnight lows are staying in the 90s. The Arizona power grid has been upgraded significantly in recent years, and the state's utility companies have invested heavily in transmission infrastructure. But the grid was not designed for a Phoenix that routinely exceeds 115 degrees for multiple days in a row, with overnight lows that provide no recovery window for the system itself. The transformers and transmission equipment that deliver power to homes and businesses run hotter when the air around them is hotter. Equipment that is rated to a certain operating temperature has less margin when ambient temperatures are already near that threshold. And the people who die when the power goes out in a Phoenix heat wave are not people who chose to be outside. They are people who were inside, in buildings they thought were safe, whose only protection from the heat was the electricity that stopped flowing. The 2023 summer, the same summer that produced the world record overnight low, also produced a series of localized outages across the Phoenix metro during peak heat periods. None of them were catastrophic in the aggregate, but in each neighborhood where power went out for hours during days when the outdoor temperature exceeded 115 degrees, the indoor temperature of homes without power climbed to dangerous levels faster than most people expected. Concrete and drywall absorb heat during the day and release it into the interior at night. A house that has been sitting in 115-degree heat all day does not become comfortable when the sun goes down. It becomes an oven that slowly releases the heat it stored. The people who cannot leave when that happens are the same people who cannot afford to run their air conditioning all summer. The same people who live in older housing stock without efficient insulation. The same people who do not have a